Next up, we're going to talk about the opacity property and also the alpha channel that we can use with colors. So basically, both of these have to do with transparency, but they are different. So we're going to begin with alpha channel, which sounds more intense than what it is. If you can recall RGB colors, red, green, and blue, we also have RGBA, where there is now a fourth channel called the alpha channel. And this governs the transparency of the color, how see-through is the color. So it's a value from 0 to 1, not 0 to 255 like the other three channels. 0 to 1, 1 is not at all transparent, and 0 is completely transparent. So I'll show you some examples. We can use this in place of any color. So let's go into our body here. I'm in a new document once again. I'll add maybe a section here with a div. And this div, I'm just going to give it an ID of RGBA because I'm going to show another example of something else, and I'll give that one a different ID so I can just easily select them. Okay, so in my CSS, I'm going to give the section itself a width of maybe 500 pixels, a height of 500 pixels, and I'm going to give it a background color of, how about magenta? So there is our background color for the container, and then I'm going to select that div itself, which I called RGBA. I'll give it a width of maybe 50%, a height of 50%, and then a background color to start of, how about just white? All right, so there is our first div that we're now going to give a different background color to. If I want an RGBA color, if I want it to be white, I could do 255, 255, 255, and then 1, which is just not transparent at all, and we shouldn't see a difference. But if I set this to 0, now our background is completely transparent. If I do something like 0.7, it's partially transparent. So it's white, but that pink or magenta is bleeding through. Now what's important to note here is that the A part, the alpha channel, this color, is only going to affect the background color of the element, or wherever I'm using this. I could use RGBA colors for text colors, but if I actually added text in here, right, let's just do some lorem, and I think just by default it's black, that text is still completely black. It itself is not changed in any way. So the background is transparent-ish, but everything else is not. Now, if we compare that to the next property, which is opacity. Opacity is different. It is not a piece of a color or a channel like RGBA. Instead, opacity is a property we set on an element that will make, or it governs the entire element's transparency, including its contents and any descendants. So if I made just a duplicate of this, but this time I give this div an ID of opacity, and then I hop over here, and I'll select the opacity ID. I guess I'll just duplicate this entire thing, but let's give it a different background color. Background color of maybe yellow. Let's see what we are looking at here. Okay, so there we go. No opacity in play at this point. Now, opacity is a property that goes from 0 to 1. So 0 is completely transparent, and then 1, not at all transparent. It's not hidden or anything. So if I give it a opacity of 0.5, halfway transparent, that applies to the entire element. So if you look at that text, I'm hoping it shows up in the screencast. Maybe I'll go with 0.3. It's very magenta-y, right? It's barely black. It's very transparent, so we see that magenta coming through. And there's also a very significant difference here between the two. On opacity, or with opacity, if I have a button or any other content, this is also going to be impacted. The entire element, this entire div, is going to be transparent. Versus with RGBA, I'm really just doing it on one tiny property, background color of this one element. So if I have other elements in there, they're not impacted unless I also give them a transparent background color. So that's all I want to show for now. I will mention that there are alpha channel colors for different color values, so not just RGBA, but if you use a hexadecimal color, so I'm just going to make one up here. Or maybe I'll use the color picker. Why don't I do that? So let's pick one. And I can change the syntax to be a hex. Let's go with maybe one of that color, sure. So that's my hex color. That is not at all transparent, it's just full color. Now with alpha channel for RGBA, we have an extra number from 0 to 1 that we add. For a hexadecimal, for a hex color, we actually have 2 digits, hexadecimal digits, going from 00 all the way up to FF. For full transparency, it's 00, FF is no transparency at all. Think of it as 0 to 1. So if I want to slightly, you can actually play around with it here, but if I wanted a different level of transparency, if you watch this last 2 digits here, as I scroll down in the color picker, they go from 00, that's completely transparent, up to FF, although if you get to FF, it will just be shortened because it's not necessary. But those last 2 digits there control that opacity of the background color, the alpha channel. So not of the entire element. So if I do something like that, it's pretty dark, it's pretty transparent, and you can see the background is shining through, and we're using hex colors. Personally, I prefer RGBAs if you're going to be changing that alpha channel very much, because it's just easy to quickly look at it and understand how transparent it is. If you look at this, yes, it's not that hard. Especially once you get more practice with hex colors, but it's not immediately apparent. But I just wanted to show that to you. So we have hex is one option with our alpha channel, and then more commonly we have RGBA colors, where we have that explicit alpha channel, and we have to write RGBA instead of RGB. Okay,